So I I made some little test pieces. This is just MDF, and then what I did was I stuck down some pieces of bark like this down to these bases, and then filled in some of the little cracks and stuff with this fiber paste stuff. Golden. I don't know who else makes this. They're a little bit pricey, I think. Golden, the stuff that they make, but it's really good stuff. But yeah, I filled in some of the cracks with a little bit of plaster, and like this, I used a piece of styrofoam, and then kind of built up some little stuff, around the base. And then I used some Woodland Scenics tree armatures and stuck them in there. I got a kit that comes with some little, clump foliage, and then some little tree armatures. Like you can twist these, and they have little wires in them. The actual armatures. I don't want to do it on this guy because I kind of like him how I have him. But yeah, I used like a couple little actual rocks, too. This is just like some aquarium gravel like here. And so the only thing is that I think that the tree bark stuff, I don't know how durable it is. I mean, it's sealed, it's painted up and everything. It looks really good. I like how it looks. But the thing is that I'm a little bit worried about, one, it has like stuff in it, like bacteria and things like that, and I'm worried about it kind of like breaking down. So my sister got me a nice, she got me a gift card to Amazon for my birthday, like 50 bucks. So it was burning a hole in my pocket, and I decided to get some Woodland Scenics rock molds. So it's just like this stuff. You pour plaster in there, and then you get some cool looking kind of like rock texture. And I got a good tough plaster. It's sort of it's almost like a dental stone, or something like that. Like normal plaster, you would be able to kind of like scratch it with your fingernail, or like a piece like this, you could just break it. But this is super tough. Like I'm pushing on it as hard as I can to try and get it to break, because like normally that's what you would do. Like you would kind of like score it and then like break, in places like this where it's like kind of already has a fracture. So I'm gonna scale up. There's some things there's some things that I did. This is just another piece of MDF that I was doing a watercolor experiment, and I decided to use the MDF. Like this is paper, but I decided to reuse the MDF pieces. Got quite a bit of MDF out of one one old painting that I didn't like. So yeah, I'm gonna show you how the new way that I'm gonna do these. And I might use some cork. Well, yeah, I'll show you how I did that. I'll show you how I texture the cork, or not the cork, just the tree bark. But it's like, it's not sanitized or anything like that. I just found it walking my dog in the park. So no guarantees that this stuff will stay. I mean, if you're using it for like to throw terrain, in your games and stuff, you're probably going to destroy it anyways. I mean, if you get some good out of it, then great, But I'll show you my new way of making this stuff. Alright, so I went ahead and just, hot glued like this. I wanted to try and experiment with this because this is going to be super durable. I mean, this is going to be like practically indestructible as long as it doesn't like peel up. As long as this doesn't warp. I might seal both sides of this so that it contracts at the same rate. But I did already glue this piece of paper to this side, so this side should technically already be sealed. It shouldn't really warp much more than that. Yeah, I want to try these outcrop little rock molds are perfect for stuff like this. Like, you can just set them down flat, and then they look, perfect, just like that. Look really great. And then I'm gonna do one just to show kind of the like the technique of how I got some nice looking stone texture on the bark on this one. And also I wanted to kind of plan around having like a tree in the middle. Same with this one, but this one is going to be the same, just all rocks. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up some plaster, and then I'm going to add some sawdust to it to kind of thicken it up. What you want is kind of like a cottage cheese like consistency. That's like what like sculpt a mold or things like that. If you have a little bit thicker consistency, it won't be quite as runny. Like, you want it runny when you're pouring it into molds, because that helps it, retain all the details of the molds. But when you're trying to build up texture, you don't. Like you can see on this one, there's a couple little air bubbles, little pockets. But, no big deal. I mean, it's just, it's supposed to be rock, so all you do is just break up that area or put some flock on it or some sand or whatever. Yeah, so I'm gonna mix up some plaster next, and then I'm gonna put plaster all around and try and make some little hills. So this is the kind of consistency that, if you mix this stuff on the bag, this is a fine kind of tough casting plaster, and this is perfect, like kind of running off the tip of this popsicle stick, like I don't know, like a thick sauce, like a like a bechamel or something like that. So I'll show you how. I mean, there's really not much to this. Like pouring into these rock molds, they do have uneven bottoms. So if you can find something that'll support them. I'm going to cast a little bit because I made a little bit too much of this plaster. But this is a good consistency for casting with. So I'm gonna cast a couple more of these guys, these little molds. And I think these were, let's say, like $10 each on Amazon. They're Woodland Scenics rock molds, and you don't even, you don't need to fill them all the way. Like I mean, it actually works a little bit better if you don't fill them too much, and then you get, pieces like this that are pretty flat on one side, and then you can just glue that side down. I'm going to use these for a rock face later. Alright, and now I'm going to start dumping sawdust in here to kind of thicken it up. Ooh, that was kind of a lot. But you want kind of like, yeah, like a goopy, like it does thicken up, it just turns into sort of like a pasty kind of texture. Kind of, just added a little too much. Need to add a little more water to this. I want like cottage cheese kind of consistency. Okay, there we go. Like kind of like a slurry, like cement kind of texture. That's about right. Okay, so I went ahead and went around and put the my slurry, my mixture around everything, and you can see it's already got some like ground texture, and this is, I mean, it's just been sitting there for a few minutes, but it's already like a lot of the way cured. And then I'm gonna seal everything after this, but you can see like these trees, like where the little seam was where they attach, that's not going anywhere. And then you can just pose these however you want. They have wires in them and then they bend and stuff. So and then I went ahead and rubbed a little bit onto these pieces of bark to kind of get a little bit of a stone texture on them too. But I feel like I lost a little bit of detail, so I left some areas where there's like some little cleaving, like fractures, and then ended up putting a couple of pieces of, you know, aquarium gravel back onto the tops of these pieces where I kind of covered it up. So anyways, I'm going to let these dry and or cure, and then I'm going to prime them. Take it from there. Alright, so I've got this guy covered in my slurry. Now I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna, while it's still a little bit wet, I'm gonna do some texturing with some sculpting tools. You can kind of like brush it out of the areas where I want to keep the detail on these rocks, like fill in the space in between, but keep the detail. And it's already like, it's just been sitting for a little while and it's already like curing, you know, definitely cures very fast. But these look like they could just be like cleaves, like little fractures in the rock. They don't, you know, they could be dirt. Like I was thinking about flocking some of these parts in between. I think that would look cool to have some little stuff growing in there. But I'm gonna texture it up and clean it up a little bit. But the rock actually doesn't really look out of place at all against the styrofoam. Like, so where the areas where the styrofoam kind of pokes out, it actually does look like rocks, kind of. So I'm gonna keep that a little bit. Some spots. Alright, so these guys have been curing out in the sun for a little while. You can see that, like I thought, this is kind of peeling up a little bit, not very much, but this is pretty much like totally dry. You know, it's only been out in the sun for a little while, but you can already feel the moisture is kind of evaporated from it, mostly. But the stuff is cured and it's, you know, it's nice and hard. I guess I could texture this stuff a little bit more, some of the stuff. But these rock molds, these are pretty much cured. These are like totally dry, just bone dry, after only being out in the sun for a little while. I mean, granted, I'm in Colorado and we get a lot of sun, and it's pretty dry, but did not take long at all for these guys to cure. Right, so these guys are pretty much dry. I went ahead and popped out the other casts I did, and then I went over these guys, these rock molds, with just like, all you really have to do is just kind of go in there with like a toothbrush, you know, and then just kind of like scrub it a little bit, and then if you have any like really stubborn pieces, you can take like a sculpting tool, you know, or something, and like go in there and like yank them out. But I feel like just going over them once with the toothbrush to get the stuff out of there is plenty. And then these guys, you know, like this guy I felt looked a little bit bare on the top. I kind of want to do something up here. I did go ahead and go into the little cracks too, and then kind of like redefine some of the little areas so that the rock kind of stands out a little bit better. But I'm gonna seal this with something like a Mod Podge. See, I really like how this looks. Like right here, these rocks, and then this kind of too. I tried to kind of sculpture this stuff, the styrofoam, a little bit, just to give it some texture, some more like kind of rock. And you know, that looks good, as long as it's mixed in with the other rock molds. I don't know if I would try just doing this by itself, but so one thing, I'm gonna go over everything with something to seal it, but before I do that, I'm gonna use a little bit of this pumice gel stuff to add a little bit of rock texture to some of these areas where like the styrofoam is exposed. And I'm just using like a cheapo brush. This is let's see, like Craft Smart or something like that. Don't use your good brushes with this stuff because it'll ruin your brushes. But I'm just gonna kind of go in and like fill a few of the little cracks, kind of go over some of this stuff. So you can see like a little bit of this plaster is come loose, but it looks really good. The dried stuff, you know, the texture looks really spot on. Like it looks perfect for like ground or you know, rocks or whatever. But this stuff is going to add a little bit of texture, and it's also going to kind of seal it too. Yeah, I think if I was going to do this again, I would have more rocks kind of like breaking up areas like this where it's I feel like it needs something like a tree on top or something. I was kind of in a hurry to get this thing done because I didn't want my plaster to dry on me. But yeah, that looks really good. I mean, especially around here, like around the base, looks really, really convincing. Really good looking rock texture. Okay, so I went ahead and went over everything with with the pumice gel stuff to kind of fill in a few little cracks, and then I made sure and go over all of the areas with exposed styrofoam, and then I'm gonna go overhead. I'm gonna hit this with a coat of like a Mod Podge or something like that, maybe some acrylic medium, to just seal it before I start painting on it. I mean, I'm sure it would soak up paint really well, but yeah, I want to seal it and prime it. You know, like if you were doing like a desert table, you'd almost just stop right here. I mean, the texture looks really cool. Definitely looks like dirt or something like that. So I'm going to seal it with a Mod Podge, and then and I went over the pieces of the bark with the pumice gel stuff to just kind of add a little bit of texture and try not to lose too much of the detail for the cleaving, kind of like rock faces and stuff, but add a little bit of stone texture. So yeah, I definitely want to prime these armatures because paint it doesn't want to stick to plastic. So yeah, I'm gonna seal it and then prime it. Alright, so after playing with this a little bit, I did coat it with a little bit of Mod Podge, and then of course the plaster. I mean, everything just soaks it up like a sponge. And then I sprinkle a little bit of sawdust on top of it. And but after playing, I mean, I really like how it looks. I think it looks awesome. But after messing with this for a little bit, I think this is the best way to do it. So I'm gonna take a wet brush. I'm gonna use a little bit of Mod Podge, and then I'm gonna kind of cover the sawdust part of it, which is the part that I'm the most worried about with the Mod Podge. And I'm not going on like 100%. I mean, yeah, pretty close to it, but and you know, I can hit the plaster or the rocks. I mean, it doesn't matter at all about the rocks, but so I don't want it on there quite so much. So now I'm just gonna take my thing of sawdust. Okay, that makes some room. I'm gonna take my sawdust like this. I'm gonna sprinkle a little bit around the sides. Like so. And then kind of tamp it off. And then anywhere where I don't want it, where I don't want the sawdust, I just kind of hit that with a little bit of water, like that, on top. And then it just kind of runs down into the onto the sides of it. I mean, not that it looks out of place, like on top of the rocks. I think it kind of actually adds a little bit to it. A little bit of texture that gets lost in the, you know, the molding process. But yeah, that looks super convincing. You know, like those are really realistic looking hills. You know, again, like you could stop there if you were just paint the rocks and then, you know, on the trees and be done with it. But that's some really realistic looking, you know, turf. And that's just sawdust, you know, it's free. I get it from next to the belt sander. But I think I'm gonna cut it there, and then I'm gonna do a part 2 where I show how I like to paint these guys. Alright, thanks for watching.